Hi everybody. This is not intended to be a detailed presentation, rather it's just a quick snapshot of what I'm going to be talking about at the conference in Tasmania later on in the year. Essentially, we're talking about health and safety reporting and what that means for an organisation. A good start point, I think, is the Pike River Royal Commission. That was an inquiry into a disaster in New Zealand when 29 men died in an underground coal mine explosion. And one of the observations of the Royal Commission was that the board appeared to receive no evidence proving the effectiveness of crucial systems. And in large part, what I want to talk about at the conference is why can't we actually provide the right information to understand if our health and safety management systems work, and what is it that we might be able to do to achieve that outcome. Now, the start point for all of these conversations is really hazards in the workplace and how we understand those hazards and control them. That really requires a consideration of two key elements. The first is whether or not we have what courts and tribunals have referred to as proper systems for managing the hazard. And understanding if we've got proper systems really requires a consideration of things like legal requirements, industry guidance and codes of practice, and a consideration as an organisation of what we know or what we ought to know. And that's a theme that comes through regularly in cases. The other element that goes to this idea of assurance and due diligence and managing risk is adequate supervision. Now, adequate supervision contains any number of elements, and it can vary between industries and organisations, but we talk about training and inspections and audits and investigations and reporting and checklists and so on and so on. We could make lists like that all day. And the relationship between systems and supervision, and I guess really the importance of supervision, is whether this proper system that we've developed has been implemented and whether it's effective to manage the hazard. Ultimately, particularly after event, they're the sorts of questions we need to be able to answer. Now, there's also a relationship between systems and supervision, particularly in the context of continuous improvement. So if we have good processes of supervising our safety management systems, that should feed back into the system itself and help continually improve it. So just as an example, when we talk about a requirement around what we know or what we ought to know, there's a question about how much time and effort or supervision do we actually put into understanding what we know or ought to know. So they're sort of some foundational concepts, I think, that underpin assurance and due diligence and reporting. Of course, what's proper and what's adequate are quite subjective terms. And as an organisation, you might set a standard for what you determine to be proper or adequate for yourself. But in a legal context, when we're talking about health and safety, we're talking about proper and adequate judged in the light of what is reasonably practicable. And reasonably practicable is really a judgment call that balances the risk we are concerned about against the time, trouble, effort, cost, and so on that we need to manage the risk. And in the conference, I'll be exploring the cases that help us understand that. But of course, the risk in all of this is the amount of assumption that sits behind our systems and supervision and the extent to which we understand, expose, and challenge those assumptions. So just taking something really simple like a checklist, there's a whole lot of assumptions that sit behind checklists as to whether they've been done, whether they've been done well, whether they're just tick and flick exercises, whether the people who complete them understand them. There's a whole range of factors that feed into that. And this is where it becomes really dangerous in the context of health and safety reporting. Because if we are reporting that all of our checklists have been completed, then there are an enormous number of assumptions that we need to understand behind that checklist before we can in any way have any confidence that that particular reporting tells us anything at all about the effectiveness or otherwise of safety management. In my view, this is really compounded because so much of what we report doesn't tell us anything about whether our health and safety hazards are being managed, and they are nothing more than measures of activity. So we measure things like the percentage of action items closed out, the number of hazards reported, the number of site inspections. They are measures of activity, and they tell us what we do, but they don't tell us if our hazards are managed. And as I've touched on this idea of assumptions, we assume so much behind those activities. And if those assumptions are incorrect, that fundamentally undermines any reliance we can have about the effectiveness of our safety management systems. Worse still, the current process of health and safety reporting, which is so focused on activity, really does have a tremendous potential to create an illusion of safety. Creates the illusion that safety is managed when in fact all we have is evidence of a lot of activity. And it creates this illusion because, for example, we have 100% closeout of all our corrective actions, and so we have a green traffic light on our safety scorecard. But the assumptions behind the closeout of corrective actions are really important before we can make or get any comfort that the particular measure tells us anything about the effectiveness of safety management. So these are the sorts of themes that I'm really interested to explore at the conference. I want to explore health and safety reporting, what it currently looks like, how we can move away from measuring activity and really start thinking about, again, to borrow from the Pike River Royal Commission, how we prove the effectiveness of our crucial systems. Now, I appreciate that the conference is quite a way away, so if you want more information in the meantime, there's the link to the conference website, my blog, where I've talked about these issues before and written a number of articles, is www.mysafetythoughts.com. And if you're interested in some of these, in what I do more broadly, you can have a look at Nexus Lawyers and our website, www.nexuslawyers.com.au. Thanks very much, and I hope to see some of you at least at the conference.